Sarah Chun stood in the massive hall of the Galactic Council. The ceiling stretched so high above her that she could barely see where it ended. Around her, beings from hundreds of different worlds sat in floating chairs that moved through the air like magic. Some looked like giant insects with too many arms. Others were made of what seemed like living crystal that sparkled in the light. A few were so strange that Sarah's human mind had trouble understanding what she was looking at. She had practiced this speech 1,000 times during the long journey from Earth. But now, standing here with all these powerful aliens staring at her, her hands shook just a little. She gripped the sides of the speaking platform and took a deep breath. Behind her, a huge screen showed pictures that made her heart heavy. Colony ships that had gone silent. Space stations that were now just twisted metal floating in the dark. Entire planets where millions of humans had lived, now covered in strange machines that ate everything in sight. "Honored members of the Council," Sarah began. Her voice echoed through the hall. "I come before you today to ask for help. My people are facing something that threatens not just us, but everyone in this galaxy." A few of the alien delegates looked up from whatever they were doing. Most kept ignoring her. Sarah pointed to the screen behind her. "These are the Devourers. They are machines that were built long ago by a race that no longer exists. For the past year, they have been moving through human space, destroying everything they find. They don't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They just consume." The images changed to show what the Devourers looked like. Massive metal shapes that looked like mechanical spiders the size of cities. Their surfaces were covered in smaller machines that crawled around like ants. When they touched a planet, the smaller machines would spread across it like a disease, breaking everything down and feeding it to the larger ships. "We have lost contact with 12 of our colonies," Sarah continued. "That's over 50 million people. Our defense fleets have tried to fight them, but we're not strong enough. Every battle, we lose more ships. At the rate they're moving, they'll reach our core systems in 6 months." She paused and looked around the hall. A few more aliens had started paying attention, but most still seemed bored. "But this isn't just about humans," Sarah said, her voice getting stronger. "We've studied the patterns. The Devourers have done this before. They've destroyed entire civilizations across the galaxy over thousands of years. When they finish with us, they won't stop. They'll keep moving, consuming everything in their path until they reach your worlds too." A sound like breaking glass filled the hall. One of the crystal beings was laughing. Sarah felt her face get hot with anger, but she kept talking. "We're asking for military support. Just enough ships to help us hold the line while we evacuate our people. We have intelligence about their weaknesses, their movement patterns. If we work together, enough." The voice boomed through the hall like thunder. Speaker Vax, the leader of the council, had finally looked up from his glowing tablet. He was one of the crystal beings, but much larger than the others. His body was made of what looked like purple glass, and light moved through it in strange patterns. "The council has heard your request, human," Speaker Vax said. His voice made it sound like he was talking to a small child. "And while we sympathize with your situation, we cannot commit valuable military resources to a conflict that your species brought upon itself." Sarah felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. "Brought upon ourselves? We didn't create these machines. We're just trying to survive." Another delegate spoke up. This one looked like a giant snake with 4 arms. "Perhaps your species should have considered its limitations before expanding so aggressively into dangerous space. The galaxy is full of threats that more experienced civilizations know to avoid." More laughter echoed through the hall. Sarah heard comments floating down from the floating chairs around her. "Primitive apes. 200 years in space, and they think they're ready for the galaxy. Their weapons are barely better than throwing rocks." Speaker Vax held up one of his crystal hands for silence. The Council recognizes that the Devourer threat is real. We have faced them before, many times. But we survived by being smart, by not fighting battles we could not win. Your species lacks the technology and wisdom to face such a threat. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. So you'll just let them destroy us? We will mourn your passing, Speaker Vax said, and Sarah could hear that he didn't really mean it. Perhaps future species will learn from your example about the dangers of expanding too quickly. Sarah looked around the hall one more time. A few of the younger delegates looked uncomfortable, but none of them spoke up for humanity. The older ones just stared at her with what looked like pity or amusement. She gathered her papers and stood up straight. She had one more thing to say. When the Devourers finish with human space, they won't stop there, she said. Her voice was calm now, but it carried clearly through the silent hall. They never do. We've studied the records of every dead civilization they've consumed. They'll keep coming, but we'll fight them anyway. We'll buy you time, even though you won't help us, because that's what humans do. She turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, she heard more laughter and the sound of delegates going back to their other business. They thought this was over. They thought humanity was already dead. Sarah knew better. She had seen what humans could do when their backs were against the wall. She had studied the history of her own species, all the times they had faced impossible odds, and somehow found a way to survive. As she reached the door, she pressed a button on her communication device. Admiral Martinez, this is Ambassador Chun. The Council has voted. No help is coming. The response came back immediately. Understood. How did the vote go? Sarah looked back at the hall full of aliens who thought they were so much better than humanity. 847 against. 12 in favor. 34 abstentions. Wow, Admiral Martinez said, and Sarah could hear the grim smile in his voice. I guess we do this the hard way. We always knew we might have to. Sarah walked out of the council chambers and toward her ship. She had a long journey back to Earth, and when she got there, her people would need to prepare for the fight of their lives. Behind her, the Galactic Council continued with their meeting, already forgetting about the small human woman who had dared to ask them for help. They would remember her soon enough. The news reached Earth 3 weeks later. Admiral Martinez stood in the command center of the Solar Defense Network, watching the faces of the men and women around him as they heard Ambassador Chun's report. The room was silent except for the soft humming of computers and the distant sound of ships moving in the space around Earth. So that's it, General Harrison said. She was the head of the Marine Corps, and her face looked like it was carved from stone. We're on our own. We always knew this was possible, Admiral Martinez replied. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from his early days working on ship engines. The Council species got to where they are by being careful. They don't take risks for anyone. Dr. Elizabeth Kane, the head of Earth Science Division, pulled up a holographic map of human space. Red dots showed where the Devourers had attacked. The red was spreading like an infection across what had once been blue points of light representing human colonies. The math is simple, she said. At their current speed, they'll reach the core systems in 4 months. Maybe 5 if we can slow them down. How many ships do we have? Admiral Martinez asked. Captain Torres, the fleet commander, answered without looking at his notes. 43 heavy cruisers, 112 destroyers, 18 carriers, and about 300 smaller ships. Plus whatever the colonies can put together, against an enemy that's been destroying civilizations for thousands of years, General Harrison said, using weapons that make our best technology look like stone knives. Admiral Martinez walked over to the big window that looked out into space. In the distance, he could see the construction yards where humans built their ships. Even now, in the middle of the night, the yards were lit up with welding torches and the movement of workers. They were building as fast as they could, but it wouldn't be enough. "There's something else," Dr. Kane said. "I've been studying the attack patterns. The Devourers aren't just randomly destroying things. They're learning. Every time they fight our ships, they adapt. Their weapons get better. Their armor gets stronger." "How is that possible?" Captain Torres asked. "They're machines, but they're not like our computers. They think. They remember. And they've been doing this for a very long time." Admiral Martinez turned back to face the room. "Then we need to make sure they learn the wrong lessons." Everyone stared at him. "What do you mean?" General Harrison asked. "They've been fighting advanced civilizations for thousands of years. Civilizations with energy weapons and force fields and all the technology that the Council species have. But we're not like those civilizations. We're new. We're primitive. Maybe that's our advantage." Dr. Kane frowned. "I don't understand." "Neither do they. That's the point." Admiral Martinez walked to the center of the room. "Every species they've fought before probably tried to match their technology. Energy against energy. Advanced weapons against advanced weapons. But we can't do that. So we won't." Captain Torres leaned forward. "What are you suggesting?" "We fight dirty. We fight like humans." Over the next month, Admiral Martinez's plan began to take shape. In shipyards across human space, workers started building ships that were different from anything they had made before. They were uglier, simpler, but built for one purpose: to hurt the enemy as much as possible before they died. The new ships had thick armor, made from layers of different metals. Their weapons were simple kinetic guns that fired chunks of metal at incredible speed. Most importantly, they were designed to explode. Every ship had charges built into it that could turn it into a bomb if needed. Meanwhile, the first reports started coming in from the outer colonies. The Devourers had reached the Kepler system, where humanity had built one of its major outposts. Admiral Rodriguez, who commanded the defense there, sent regular updates as long as he could. "They're bigger than we thought." His voice crackled through the communication system. "The largest ones are the size of small moons. Our weapons are barely scratching them." Admiral Martinez and his staff listened to the battle reports in the command center. On the tactical display, blue dots representing human ships winked out one by one. "Rodriguez to Fleet Command." The voice came through static. "We're down to 8 ships. The station is gone. But we've learned something important. They don't like it when we ram them." "Repeat that," Admiral Martinez said. "The cruiser Defiance rammed one of their smaller ships. Actually did some damage. They had to stop and repair themselves. Gave the evacuation ships time to escape." General Harrison shook her head. "He's talking about suicide attacks." "He's talking about winning," Admiral Martinez replied. "The Battle of Kepler Station lasted 6 hours. When it was over, every human ship was destroyed. But something had changed. For the first time since the war started, the Devourers had taken real damage. More importantly, they had been forced to stop and figure out what had happened. They're not used to that," Dr. Kane said as she studied the sensor readings. "Every other species they fought probably tried to preserve their ships. Run away when things got bad. But Rodriguez's people just kept attacking until the end." Similar stories started coming in from other battles. The cruiser Stalingrad, badly damaged and losing air, had crashed into a Devourer command ship instead of trying to escape. The destroyer Berlin had used its fusion reactor as a bomb, taking 2 enemy ships with it. Each battle was defeat for humanity, but the Devourers were learning to be more careful. They started moving slower, scanning for traps that weren't there. They began to expect humans to act like they had never acted before. "We're getting into their heads," Admiral Martinez said during a staff meeting. They're starting to think like we think. And that means they're not thinking like machines anymore. But the cost was terrible. Every day, more colony ships arrived at Earth carrying refugees from the outer systems. The ships were packed beyond capacity with people who had lost their homes, their families, everything they had built in the new worlds. President Chun, no relation to the ambassador, visited the refugee camps that had been set up in the empty spaces around Earth cities. She walked among the families who had escaped from the devourers and listened to their stories. They came so fast, an old man told her. He had been a farmer on New Iowa. One day we were harvesting crops. The next day, the sky was full of metal spiders. My daughter, a woman whispered, holding a picture of a young girl. She was at school when they attacked the orbital station. I never found her. President Chun returned to the capital with red eyes and a heavy heart. She called Admiral Martinez immediately. How long do we have? She asked. Maybe 2 months before they reach the core systems. 3, if we're lucky. And our chances? Admiral Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Ma'am, we're going to lose a lot of people. But we're going to make them pay for every inch of space they take. And maybe, if we're very lucky and very smart, we can hurt them enough that they think twice about moving deeper into the galaxy. That's not very encouraging. Ma'am, with respect, I'm not in the business of encouragement. I'm in the business of fighting wars. And this war is just getting started. President Chun looked out her window at the lights of the city below. Somewhere in those lights were families preparing to say goodbye to sons and daughters who would crew the ships humanity was building. Ships designed not to win battles, but to die in the most destructive way possible. Admiral, she said, do whatever you have to do. Whatever it takes. Yes, ma'am. I intend to. Captain Maria Santos watched the enemy fleet approach through the main screen of the U.S. Defiance. The Devourer ships looked like something from a nightmare. Massive metal structures covered in smaller machines that crawled across their surfaces like mechanical insects. The largest one was easily the size of a small moon, and it was heading straight for Kepler Station. How many of them are there? Asked Commander Park, her second in command. Sensors count 47 major vessels, reported Lieutenant Walsh from the science station, plus about 300 smaller craft. And we have? 18 ships total, sir. The station's defense platforms are online, but their weapons are designed for pirates, not this. Captain Santos had been in the Navy for 20 years. She had fought raiders, rebels, and even helped stop a civil war between 2 human colonies. But she had never seen anything like this. The enemy ships didn't move like normal spacecraft. They flowed through space like living things, changing direction without any visible engines or thrust. Orders from Admiral Rodriguez? She asked. Hold the line as long as possible. Give the evacuation ships time to escape. Commander Park's voice was steady, but Santos could see the fear in his eyes. Everyone knew this was a one-way mission. The battle began when the Devourers came within range of the station's weapons. Massive energy beams lanced out from the human platforms, striking the enemy ships. Santos watched the tactical display, hoping to see some sign of damage. Direct hits on multiple targets, Lieutenant Walsh reported. But I'm not reading any significant damage. Their hulls seem to be absorbing or redirecting the energy somehow. Switch to kinetic weapons, Santos ordered. All ships, fire everything you have. The human fleet opened fire with railguns and missile pods. Streams of metal projectiles and explosives shot across space toward the enemy. Some of them hit, creating bright flashes on the alien hulls. But the Devourer ships kept coming. Then they fired back. The enemy weapons were unlike anything in human military databases. Beams of something that looked like liquid fire swept across space. cutting through human ships like they were made of paper. The destroyer Hampton exploded in a ball of flame that lit up the darkness. The cruiser Moscow split in half, its crew spilling into space. "We can't fight them ship to ship," Commander Park said. "Their technology is too advanced." Santos watched 3 more of her ships die in the space of 30 seconds. The evacuation transports were still loading refugees from the station. She needed more time. "All ships, this is Santos. New plan. We're going to ram them." The communication channel exploded with voices. "Captain, that's suicide. We can't just throw our lives away. There has to be another way." "Listen to me," Santos said, cutting through the chatter. "We're going to die anyway. But if we ram them, we can take some of them with us. Give our people time to escape." She turned to her crew. "Anyone who wants to transfer to a life pod can do it now. No shame in it. This isn't what you signed up for." Nobody moved. Commander Park managed a weak smile. "Where you go, we go, Captain." Santos nodded and turned to the helm officer. "Set course for the largest enemy ship. Full speed." The Defiance accelerated toward a massive Devourer vessel. Around them, other human ships did the same thing. The destroyer Berlin aimed for a cluster of smaller enemy craft. The cruiser Stalingrad, already badly damaged, limped toward what looked like a command ship. The aliens seemed confused by this tactic. Their ships began to maneuver, trying to avoid the incoming human vessels. They fired their weapons faster, desperately trying to stop the suicide attacks. "They don't understand what we're doing," Lieutenant Walsh said. "Their sensors are going crazy trying to figure out our attack pattern." Santos smiled grimly. "That's because there isn't one. We're just going to hit them as hard as we can." The Defiance struck the massive alien ship at nearly a quarter of the speed of light. The impact was visible from orbit around the station's planet. For a moment, space itself seemed to bend around the collision point. Then both ships exploded in a fireball that outshone the local sun. But something unexpected happened. The alien ship, despite its advanced technology, had been hurt. Badly hurt. Pieces of its hull were floating in space, and the smaller machines that crawled on its surface had gone dark. Commander Zhang, watching from the station, couldn't believe what he was seeing. "The enemy ship is stopped. It's not moving." Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. The Berlin had rammed 3 smaller ships and destroyed all of them. The Stalingrad had taken the command ship with it, and now the other alien vessels seemed confused, moving without coordination. "They have to stop and repair," Dr. Kim said from the station's science lab. "They're machines, but they still follow machine logic. Damage must be fixed before continuing." This was exactly what Admiral Rodriguez had hoped for. While the aliens worked to repair their damaged ships, the last evacuation transports escaped into hyperspace. 40,000 civilians who would have died were now safe, but the victory was temporary. After 6 hours, the alien ships were repaired and moving again. They consumed what was left of Kepler Station like a swarm of metal locusts, breaking it down and adding its materials to their own mass dot. The same pattern repeated at New Geneva, at Proxima Colony, at Luna City. Each time, human ships would ram the enemy instead of trying to fight a traditional battle. Each time, some of the aliens would be damaged and forced to stop for repairs. Each time, more humans escaped. Admiral Martinez studied the battle reports from his command center back on Earth. The numbers were grim. Humanity was losing 3 ships for every 1 enemy vessel they damaged. But they were learning something important. "The aliens have to stop and think after each battle," Dr. Kane explained. "They're trying to understand why we keep using suicide attacks. It goes against everything in their programming." "How do you mean?" General Harrison asked. "Think about it. Every species they fought before was probably trying to preserve their fleets, win the war, survive. But we're not trying to win. We're just trying to hurt them as much as possible before we die. They've never encountered that before. Captain Torres looked up from his tactical display. We're changing how they think. Exactly. They're becoming more cautious. Scanning for traps. Expecting every human ship to explode. It's slowing them down. Admiral Martinez nodded. Good. But we need to do more than just slow them down. We need to stop them. In the shipyards around Earth, a new generation of vessels was taking shape. These ships were built using the hard lessons learned from the outer system battles. They were faster, tougher, and designed from the beginning to be weapons themselves. More importantly, they carried something new. Dr. Kane had been working around the clock on what she called neural interfaces, systems that would let human pilots connect directly to their ship's computers. Other species probably can't use these, she explained. The neural feedback would kill most alien brains. But humans are stubborn. We can handle the pain. The first test pilot had been a volunteer named Lieutenant Anderson. When he plugged into the system, his ship became an extension of his body. He could think a maneuver, and the ship would perform it instantly. He could feel the enemy's weapons hitting his hull. He could sense other ships around him like they were his own limbs. It's incredible, Anderson reported after the test. It's like being the ship instead of just flying it, but what? Admiral Martinez asked. It hurts. A lot, and I can feel everything. When the ship gets damaged, it feels like getting cut. When the engines strain, it feels like running until your lungs burn. Can you handle it? Anderson smiled. Sir, I've been wanting to kick these aliens' teeth in for months. A little pain isn't going to stop me. Similar reports came in from other test pilots. The new ships were faster and more maneuverable than anything humanity had built before. But the cost was high. Pilots could only stay connected for a few hours before the neural strain became dangerous. Without trying to win a long war, Admiral Martinez reminded his staff, we just need to hit them harder than they're expecting. The final evacuation ships were leaving the outer colonies now, heading for the safety of Earth's solar system. Behind them came the Devourer fleet, larger than ever after consuming the materials from human settlements. But this time, something was different. This time, humanity was ready. New contacts on long-range sensors, reported the officer on watch. Devourer fleet, bearing 27 Mark IV. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. Admiral Martinez looked out at the ships assembling near Earth. They weren't many, but they were the best humanity had ever built. And they were crewed by people who had nothing left to lose. Send a message to all ships, he ordered. This is where we make our stand. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been awake for 3 days straight. Coffee cups covered her desk like small monuments to exhaustion, and her eyes burned from staring at computer screens. But she was close to something. She could feel it. The problem isn't our weapons, she muttered to herself, pulling up another set of equations. The problem is how we think. Her assistant, Dr. Park, looked up from his own computer. What do you mean? Every species the Devourers have fought was probably smarter than us. More advanced. Better technology. But they all lost because they all thought the same way. Elena stood up and walked to the big whiteboard that covered one wall of her lab. Look at this! She drew a simple diagram. 2 circles representing fleets, with arrows showing how they would move in a typical space battle. Traditional tactics. Keep your distance, use your best weapons, try to minimize losses while maximizing damage to the enemy. Every civilization probably fought like this. That makes sense, Dr. Park said. It's logical. Exactly. It's logical. But humans aren't logical. Elena drew new arrows, chaotic lines that seemed to go in every direction. We're crazy. We do things that don't make sense. And that's our advantage. She had been working on what the military called Project Lazarus for weeks now. The name came from an old human story about someone who came back from the dead. It seemed fitting for ships that were designed to keep fighting even when they should be destroyed. The breakthrough came when she realized that other species had evolved to survive. They built their technology to be safe, reliable, and predictable. Humans had evolved to fight. Their technology didn't need to be safe. It just needed to work long enough to hurt the enemy. "Show me the neural interface tests again," she said. Dr. Park pulled up the recordings from Lieutenant Anderson's test flights. On the screen, they could see a human pilot connected to his ship through cables that ran directly into his brain. When he thought turn left, the ship turned instantly. When he wanted to fire weapons, they fired at the speed of thought. "The reaction time is incredible," Dr. Park said. "But the pain is the point," Elena replied. "Other species would have given up on this technology because it hurts. But humans are used to pain. We've been fighting through pain for millions of years." She pulled up the medical reports. Neural strain, severe headaches, temporary paralysis in some cases. Any sane species would have stopped development right here. But we're not sane. No, we're not. And that's why this might work. Admiral Martinez arrived at the lab an hour later. Elena had called him with news about a breakthrough, but she looked more exhausted than excited. "Tell me you have good news," he said. "I have news. Whether it's good depends on how you define good." Elena pulled up a new set of diagrams. "We've solved the neural interface problem." "Sort of? What do you mean, sort of?" "The interfaces work perfectly. Pilots can control their ships at the speed of thought. But there's a limit to how long they can stay connected. The human brain can only handle so much neural feedback before it starts shutting down." Admiral Martinez frowned. "How long?" "About 4 hours for a good pilot. 6 hours for someone exceptional. After that, they'll either pass out or die." "That's not very long for a battle." "No, but it might be long enough." Elena switched to a tactical display. The Devourers adapt by studying their enemies. They watch how we fight and then adjust their own tactics. But if our pilots can think and react faster than their computers can process, we might be able to stay ahead of their adaptation cycle. Admiral Martinez finished. "How many ships can we equip with these interfaces?" "We have enough equipment for about 50 ships. But there's another problem. We need pilots who can handle the neural load. Most people can't take that much pain and keep fighting." "I might know where to find people like that," Admiral Martinez said. 2 weeks later, the first squadron of neural interface fighters was ready for testing. The pilots were volunteers from all over human space. Former soldiers who had been wounded in battle. Medical patients who had learned to live with chronic pain. People who had lost everything to the Devourers and wanted revenge. Lieutenant Sarah Kim had lost her left arm in a mining accident 5 years ago. She had been told she would never pilot again. But the neural interface didn't care about missing limbs. When she connected to her fighter, she could feel the ship's weapons like they were her own hands. "It's like being born again," she told Admiral Martinez after her first test flight. "I can feel everything. The ship, the space around me, even the gravity from nearby planets. It hurts, but it's a good hurt. Like working out until your muscles burn." Similar reports came in from the other test pilots. The pain was terrible, but it was also addictive. When connected to their ships, the pilots felt more alive than they had in years. The first real test came at VOF 359. A small Devourer scouting force had arrived there ahead of the main fleet. Admiral Chun, Sarah's brother, who had taken command of the new Terra Defense Fleet, decided to try out the new ships. Remember, He told the squadron leaders over the communication link. We're not trying to win a traditional battle. We're trying to confuse them. Make them think we can do things we can't really do. The battle began like all the others. The Devour ships, 5 of them this time, moved in their usual patterns. They expected the humans to either ram them or try to fight with conventional weapons. Instead, the human ships danced out. Lieutenant Kim's fighter moved through space like it was alive. When an enemy weapon fired at her, she didn't try to dodge in a straight line. She spun and twisted and moved in ways that seemed to ignore the basic laws of physics. The neural interface let her think 3-dimensional maneuvers that no normal pilot could execute. They can't hit us, reported Squadron Leader Martinez over the communication link. Their targeting computers can't predict where we're going because we don't know where we're going ourselves. The human ships darted around the larger Devour vessels like angry insects. Their weapons were still primitive compared to the enemy's, but they were hitting targets that should have been impossible to reach. Engine pods hidden behind armor plating. Communication arrays tucked into protected spaces. Weak points that no computer would think to aim for the first time since the war began. Devour ships were taking serious damage without the humans having to ram them. Enemy vessels are withdrawing, reported the tactical officer on Admiral Chun's flagship. They're pulling back to safe distance. They're trying to figure out what just happened, Admiral Chun said. Send the recall signal. Get our people out of there before the enemy adapts. The human squadron pulled back, leaving the Devour ships floating in space, damaged and confused. It was a small victory, but an important one. Humanity had proven they could hurt the enemy without dying in the process, but the cost was becoming clear. Lieutenant Kim had to be carried out of her cockpit after the battle. Her neural system had been pushed to its limit, and she couldn't stop shaking. 3 other pilots were in similar condition. We can't keep this up forever, Dr. Vasquez told Admiral Martinez after reviewing the medical reports. The neural interfaces are burning out our pilots' brains. Even the tough ones can only handle a few battles before they start showing permanent damage. How much time do we have? Maybe a month before our best pilots are too damaged to fight. Less if we push them hard. Admiral Martinez looked out at the fleet assembling near Earth. Hundreds of ships, many of them equipped with the new neural interfaces. Thousands of men and women who were ready to die for their species. A month, he said. That should be enough. Enough for what? To teach these machines something they've never learned before. That humans don't fight to win. We fight because we can't do anything else. The reports from Wolf 359 had reached the Galactic Council. In the Great Assembly Hall, delegates who had dismissed humanity weeks ago were now studying tactical reports that made no sense. The humans are moving their ships in impossible patterns, reported a military analyst from the Corthany fleet. Our computers can't model their flight paths. It's like they're thinking with their machines instead of just controlling them. Speaker Vax studied the holographic display with growing concern. The human ships in the recording were moving like living things, reacting instantly to enemy fire, striking at weak points with surgical precision. This is not possible with their technology level, he said. Primitive fusion drives cannot generate the acceleration patterns we're seeing here. Perhaps, suggested a junior delegate, they've developed something new. In a matter of weeks? That's not how technological advancement works. But even as he said it, Speaker Vax wondered if he might be wrong. These humans had already shown they didn't follow the normal rules. Back at Wolf 359, the Devourer ships had finished their repairs and were scanning the area where the battle had taken place. Their computers analyzed every piece of debris, every energy reading, every trace of the strange human tactics. But for the first time in thousands of years, they couldn't figure out what they had fought. The human ships had moved in ways that didn't match any known technology or tactical doctrine. It was as if the humans had found a way to break the rules of space combat itself. The Devour fleet paused in its advance toward Earth, not from fear. Machines don't feel fear. The Devour fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system, exactly when Admiral Martinez had predicted. 300 massive ships, grown even larger after consuming the materials from a dozen human worlds. At the center of the formation was something that had never been seen before, a Devour ship the size of a small planet, covered in so many smaller machines that it looked like a mechanical world come to life. "Contact," reported the sensor officer on the bridge of the UES Terra Nova, Admiral Martinez's flagship. Devour fleet bearing 0 Mark 0, range 12 billion kilometers and closing. Martinez stood at the center of the bridge, looking at the tactical display. Around Earth, humanity's final fleet waited in formation. 200 ships, the last of human military power. Many of them were equipped with the neural interfaces that Dr. Vasquez had developed. All of them were crewed by people who had nothing left to lose. "How long until they reach Earth?" he asked. 18 hours at current speed, sir." Martinez nodded. 18 hours to prepare for the end of everything. He opened a channel to all ships in the fleet. "This is Admiral Martinez speaking to all vessels. In a few hours, we're going to face an enemy that has destroyed civilizations for thousands of years. They expect us to run or die quickly like every other species they've encountered. They're wrong." He paused, looking around the bridge at the men and women who would die with him. "We're not fighting to win today. We're fighting to prove something. To show the galaxy that humans don't give up. That we don't break. That when pushed to the wall, we push back harder than anyone thought possible." Similar speeches were being given on ships throughout the fleet. Captain Santos, now commanding the new UE's Defiance II, gathered her crew in the main hangar. Lieutenant Kim, still recovering from her neural interface burns, stood with the other fighter pilots in their ready room. On Earth below, President Chun watched the fleet from her command bunker. Around the planet, orbital defense platforms powered up their weapons. They wouldn't be enough to stop the Devourers, but they would add their firepower to humanity's last stand in the Galactic Council chambers. The emergency session had been going on for hours. Reports from the battle zone were being transmitted live to delegates across the galaxy. For the first time in galactic history, a species was making its final stand against the Devourers, with the whole galaxy watching. "The human fleet is moving to intercept," reported Speaker Vax, his crystal form glowing with nervous energy. "They're not trying to evacuate their population. They're actually going to fight." "Madness," muttered the Courtney delegate. "They should be fleeing to the outer systems, preserving what population they can." "Perhaps," said a junior delegate from the cell in hegemony. "That's why they're still fighting and every other species that faced the Devourers is dead." The battle began when the two fleets were still millions of kilometers apart. The Devourers opened fire first, sending streams of exotic energy across space. The human fleet responded with everything they had: kinetic weapons, missiles, and something new that made the alien sensors scream warnings. "Neural link established," reported Lieutenant Kim as she connected to her fighter. The pain hit her immediately, like fire running through her brain, but she had learned to fight through it. Around her, 49 other pilots did the same thing. The human fighters moved like nothing the Devourers had ever encountered. They didn't fly in formation or follow tactical patterns. Instead, each pilot moved their ship like it was part of their own body, reacting to enemy fire faster than any computer could calculate. "They can't track us," Kim reported over the communication link. "Their targeting systems are overheating, trying to predict our movements." But the real surprise came when the larger human ships joined the battle. Admiral Martinez had saved his best innovation for last. The capital ships had been equipped with something Dr. Vasquez called a quantum neural network. Instead of one pilot controlling one ship, multiple pilots could link their minds together and control an entire formation. Network established, reported Commander Torres from the heavy cruiser Moscow. I can feel the other ships. It's like having extra arms. The human capital ships began to move in perfect coordination, sharing information at the speed of thought. When one ship detected an enemy weak point, all the others could target it instantly. When one ship was damaged, the others could cover for it without any delay. The Devourer fleet, which had been advancing in their usual overwhelming formation, suddenly found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to think as one massive organism. Human ships covered each other, shared targeting data, and coordinated their attacks in ways that should have been impossible. "This is impossible," reported the lead Devourer construct to its fleet. "The humans are displaying tactical coordination that exceeds their technological capacity." But the machines had made a critical error. They had studied human technology and found it primitive. They had analyzed human tactics and found them chaotic. But they had never tried to understand how humans thought. "Neural network at full capacity," reported Dr. Vasquez from her monitoring station on Earth. "All pilots are connected. They're sharing not just tactical data, but emotions, instincts, everything that makes them human." The connected pilots could feel each other's pain when their ships were damaged. They could sense each other's determination when the battle seemed hopeless. Most importantly, they could think together in ways that no computer could predict. The tide of battle began to turn. For the first time in the war, human ships were destroying Devourers faster than they were being destroyed themselves. The alien formation began to break apart as their ships found themselves outmaneuvered by an enemy they couldn't understand. "Devourer flagship is changing course," reported the tactical officer. "It's moving to engage our main fleet directly." Admiral Martinez watched the massive enemy ship approach. It was the size of a small moon, covered in weapons that could destroy planets. But he was ready for it. "All ships, execute final protocol," he ordered. The final protocol was something that had never been tried before. Every ship in the human fleet would link their neural networks together into one massive mind. The pain would be incredible. Many pilots would die from the neural overload. But for a few moments, humanity would think and fight as a single organism. "Neural links connecting," reported Commander Torres. "I can feel everyone. Every pilot, every gunner, every engineer in the fleet." Lieutenant Kim felt her mind expand to encompass the entire battle. She could sense the fear and determination of thousands of humans, all connected through the quantum neural network. The pain was beyond description, but so was the sense of unity. "We are one," she whispered. And the words were echoed by every human in the fleet. The Devourer flagship opened fire with weapons that destroyed entire civilizations. But the human fleet moved as one organism, dodging and weaving through the incoming fire with perfect coordination. Every ship knew exactly where every other ship would be, because they were all thinking with the same mind. The human counterattack was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. 200 ships, moving and fighting as one, focused all their firepower on weak points in the massive enemy vessel. The Devourer's advanced armor began to crack under the precisely coordinated assault. "Target damaged," reported the collective human consciousness. Continuing attack. The massive alien ship tried to adapt, changing its armor configuration and weapon patterns. But the human fleet adapted faster, anticipating every change before it happened. They were thinking not just with human intelligence, but with human intuition, human creativity, human stubbornness. That after 6 hours of battle, the impossible happened. The Devourer flagship, the ship that had consumed entire star systems, began to break apart under the relentless human attack. Pieces of its hull drifted away into space, and the smaller machines that crawled on its surface went dark. "Flagship destroyed," reported Admiral Martinez, his voice barely audible through the neural strain. "All Devourer vessels are withdrawing." The surviving enemy ships began to retreat toward the edge of the solar system. For the first time in their long history, the Devourers had met an enemy they couldn't defeat. Not because humanity was more advanced, but because they were more human. In the Galactic Council chambers, the silence was complete. The delegates watched their screens in shock as the human fleet, battered and barely functional, held formation around Earth. They had done something that was supposed to be impossible. "The Devourer fleet is in full retreat," reported Speaker Vax, his voice filled with disbelief. "The humans have actually stopped them." "How?" asked the Corthany delegate. "By not fighting like any other species," replied the junior delegate from Selene. "They didn't try to match the Devourer's technology. They used their own nature as a weapon." On Earth, President Chun received a communication from Admiral Martinez. The Admiral looked exhausted, and she could see the neural strain in his eyes, but he was smiling. "Ma'am, I'm pleased to report that the Devourer threat has been neutralized. They're retreating toward the galactic rim. I don't think they'll be back anytime soon. What's our status?" she asked. "We've lost about 60% of the fleet. Many of our pilots are in critical condition from the neural strain. But we're alive.